Hey everyone. Okay, Canada. This is getting real serious now. It's really important that you start to understand that you really need to get your house in order. Because if you're not paying attention, which I do, I'm here to help you out in that regard. All the underlying fundamentals, and now even the political and the professional classes are even they are starting to raise the red flags, right? Starting to sound the warning to the people. So if you're foolish or naive enough to just say they're just crying wolf at this stage, then you continue to keep living in that realm, right? In that mystical world, in that dreamland, if you want, at your own peril. But you will never be able to suggest or say to anyone around you that, hey, nobody told me, because you've been warned. And this is a headline from the National Post. Pressure builds on Bank of Canada to tackle house prices by raising interest rates. And this is a Reuters article being republished by, like I say, National Post. Pressure is building on the Bank of Canada to signal an interest rate hike as some economists fret about a rapid rise in domestic house prices after 8 years of rock bottom borrowing costs. Like I say, well, those of us that are in the know, of course, you're just like going like this to the Canadian population, and with home capital and all these lenders and all these people that know they have a backstop, the big banks, right? Whether it's a bail-in or a bail-out regime, they're all like, yeah, let's just keep this shit going because hey, we're not going to be held responsible, right? It's the removal of moral hazards has completely destroyed the economy in not just Canada but all modern Western developed, and it's as a result of governments and central banks. So these central banks with these ridiculously low interest rates, where you're just basically enticing the people to just, hey, come take on more debts, assume more debt loads. Look, we'll give it to you for free, right? I mean, if you can borrow money, because that's the thing, you didn't have to work for it if you're borrowing it. You literally just have to say, can you lend it to me and I'll work for it later, right? Now, if you as a person, you as an individual, would you lend money to someone that was reckless and irresponsible throughout most of their past? Well, of course you wouldn't be like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you could lend them the money and even if they didn't pay it back, you'd get it back because you could steal from someone else, well, your incentive would dramatically change then, wouldn't it? Right? If they were the only ones, if they were solely responsible for paying you back, you'd be like, you have no history of being able to pay your loans and your obligations. So no, I'm not going to fucking lend you money. But in the fiat world, in the central planning world, governments can take from the wealth creators or the incomes of the rest of Canadians to prop up and put a backstop to the economic illiteracy or the malinvestments or the bad deeds of everyone else in the population. So the banks no longer care about moral hazards or their own ability to retain their business model, because they know, like I say, everyone's got a safety net in the central planning model, although that's the thing, the safety net's a false illusion, because the safety net relies on being able to enslave future generations with those debt obligations. And that means you have to actually believe in your brain that those future generations are actually going to feel obliged to pay off the debts of former generations. And if you believe that, as I've said in past videos, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona I want to sell you, right? Although I wouldn't do that because I'm not an immoral piece of shit. But come on, let's just be realistic here, folks. The central bank has kept its policy rate at or below 1% since 2009 in an effort to stimulate an economy that had struggled to gain traction since the global financial crisis. But house prices have more than doubled over the period in the two biggest markets, Toronto and Vancouver. And a closely watched measure of the country's vulnerability to debt, the household debt to income ratio, has risen to a record high 167%. So in other words, for every dollar Canadians are bringing in, they're spending $1.67. Is that sustainable? Right? Mathematically says no. Some idiot politician or central banker might tell you that, oh, you can. What, with the magic of unicorn fairy dust? I don't know, right? I don't know where they come up with these concepts, but like I say, these aren't people. They're they're snake oil salesmen. So they'll tell you whatever you want to hear, right? Right? Just like if you realize that you're getting yourself a mass name, just like my kids, like, oh no, don't worry. I could probably convince a lot of people not take on, but I would be immoral for doing so, and they'd be idiots for following my advice, right? In reality, that's fine if that's just between those two, right? Suffer your own consequence for your own dumbasses. In the central planning world we live in, us responsible people are the ones that are going to be forced to have to try to pick up and assume the task of dealing with all the negative consequences and ramifications for this bullshit and try to keep the economy stimulated. Like I said, and a lot of us are showing we're not going to do it. Most of the economic growth that you're seeing today is false growth based on speculative demands. Well, whether it's, like I say, look at the housing market, the largest contributor to our growth, the economic growth of Canada. And how's that happening? Because people see the speculative increase in their wealth by the speculative growth in their valuation of their homes, and then they borrow against it. But was there any real wealth created there? No, it's all fake. It's all speculative wealth, which can be, when it's speculative, when there's no real world fundamentals that create it, as magically as it can appear, it can just as magically disappear. And central planners and these central banks keeping these interest rates at these ridiculously low rates where it's just like, here, take this money. Go ahead. Because it's helping to stimulate the economy. And by stimulating the economy, it keeps all the central planners going along, humming along, because we benefit. For every dollar you spend, especially with fiat currencies and fractional reserve, hey, I can lend out 10 more, right? And make profits on all that. So the central planners benefit from all your mass consumption and mass indebtedness. But they're the ones that are never going to be on the hook to pay it off. You're actually trying to force those obligations on the people that are trying to be personally responsible and accountable, or the unborn, the yet to be born, or the youth that don't even have any skin in the game at this stage, right? Do you know how moral that is? I mean, think about it. The people that you're trying to force all these future debt obligations onto haven't even been born yet, or are so young they don't even understand what the hell's going on. Central planners will always make off like a bandit because, like I say, in the central planning model, everything runs through them, right? Right? Economists worry that leaving low rates in place for too long could encourage too much borrowing and leave the economy vulnerable if growth slows or house prices drops, while investors have seized on recent hints of risk to financial stability. So, of course, right? The way you reduce the pace of credit growth and eventually solve the problem of high leverage is by having higher rates, not by keeping rates low, says Carlos Cabestran, head of Canada and Mexico's economics at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. It is painful for the economy when you start tightening, but you have to do it at some point. Otherwise, leverage is going to keep increasing, right? It's just like with your kids. Oh, who wants to be that parent that says, hey, listen, you've spent way outside your means, man. I'm going to have to cut you off now, right? Because if I keep giving you, well, I'm going to be broke, right? And there's always that, that's the negative aspect of saying, okay, no more freebies, no more wealth redistribution, no more theft to benefit you, right? At some stage of the game, it's like, no, you better learn to take care of your business. Take care of yourself. Learn to be personally responsible and personally accountable. That's really what you're talking about. And the central bank is telling Canadians at this stage of games, don't worry about being personally responsible or accountable. We'll take care of that for you, right? Just keep borrowing and spending. Just keep putting yourself further in indebted servitude to the ruling class. That's basically what they're telling you. And there's a lot of Canadians saying it's like, okay, right? They're dangling that fucking bait out there, and the Canadians are like, I'll take it. I wouldn't, because I know what comes. Yeah, I know what's inside that bait, right? Yeah. It's not just the bait. There's a whole lot of shit that's inside that bait that's going to have long-term consequences and ramifications for your long-term outlook for your financial economic stability or ability to take care of yourself and sustain your personal livelihoods and your living for the rest of your life. Those are the things that a lot of Canadians aren't thinking of, right? It's all about the here and now. It's all about the quick fix. It's like, yeah, we'll worry about that later. Well, later's going to come at some stage of the game, whether you like it or not. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.